Let me ask you something you probably haven't paused to consider in a while. Are you really thinking or are you just reacting? Most people confuse mental activity with true thought, but there's a difference, an enormous one. Reacting is automatic. Repeating what you've heard, that's not thinking. Absorbing opinions without reflection, that's not thinking either. It's not your fault though. No one ever sat you down and said, here's how to think with clarity. School taught you what to memorize, society taught you what to believe, but almost no one taught you how to actually think. Not in a way that's sharp, conscious, and grounded in reality, especially when it matters most. And here's the danger. When you don't know how to think clearly, you're not really free. You might feel like you're making choices, but you're just running a mental program written by your childhood, your culture, your fears, or the people around you. It's like living in a house you never designed. Every belief, every reaction, every decision shaped by someone else. Stoic philosophy doesn't begin with big ideas. It begins with self-awareness. Marcus Aurelius wrote not for others, but to untangle his own mind. Epictetus reminded us, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And how can you embody anything true if your thoughts aren't even your own? This video isn't here to tell you what to think. It's here to challenge how you think. Because clarity isn't a personality trait. It's a discipline. It's something you can train, something you can rebuild, one insight at a time. And the moment you start thinking clearly, everything begins to shift. You stop being overwhelmed by emotion. You stop falling for mental traps. You stop repeating cycles that aren't yours. You become the author of your own mind, not just a passive character in someone else's script. So let me ask you again, and this time, pause before you answer. Are you really thinking or just following a pattern you didn't choose? If you're ready to reclaim your inner clarity and build a mindset rooted in reason, reflection, and real emotional strength, then this is where your journey begins. Let's step into the first Stoic lesson. So let's begin at the root of the problem, where most of us go wrong without even knowing. Emotional reactivity. The cost of reactivity, your emotional autopilot. Let me ask you something most people never stop to consider. When was the last time you actually chose your reaction? Fully, consciously, without defaulting to emotion or habit? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of what we call thinking is just reactivity in disguise. We get triggered, we get annoyed, we lash out, we shut down. And if we're honest, it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels automatic, like some emotional autopilot has taken the controls. But what if I told you that autopilot is costing you your freedom? The Stoics saw this thousands of years ago. Epictetus put it simply, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That line has echoed through history because it touches something fundamental. Your reaction isn't just a moment, it's a reflection of your mind. And when we react without thinking, when we let anger, fear, pride, or insecurity guide our behavior, we're not being rational. We're not even being ourselves. We're just running an old script, a survival program, a learned behavior built from childhood, trauma, or social conditioning. The problem isn't emotion itself. The problem is unexamined emotion. Emotion that controls us instead of informing us. And that's why reactivity is not thinking. It's the absence of thought. It's the opposite of clarity. Now, this isn't about becoming a robot or suppressing how you feel. It's about learning to pause, to step back into awareness before you speak, act, or assume. Imagine if the next time someone disrespects you or something doesn't go your way, you didn't react on impulse. Instead, you took a breath. You noticed the rise of anger and said to yourself, interesting, that emotion wants to speak for me, but does it speak the truth? That moment right there, that pause, is the birthplace of clarity. It's where philosophy meets practice, where wisdom overrules ego. Because when you stop and say, I don't know yet how to respond, you've already begun to think. You've exited the cycle of automatic reaction. You've stepped into the space where thought begins. That's what the Stoics train for every day, to expand the space between stimulus and response. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Let that sink in. You have the power to revoke it, to revise the reaction, to rewrite the story, but only if you slow down enough to see it. Here's a question worth reflecting on. What's your most common emotional autopilot? Do you get defensive when criticized? Withdraw when stressed? Raise your voice when unheard? Now ask, is that truly you or just your training? Because once you see the pattern, you're no longer trapped inside it. You can choose to respond from strength, not fear, from clarity, not chaos. And over time, something beautiful happens. You become harder to shake, but easier to respect. Less reactive, but more grounded. Not colder, but calmer. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. So the next time you feel triggered, don't rush to win the argument or prove a point. Try something different. Pause, observe, and ask, is this reaction mine or did I inherit it? Because in that space between emotion and response, you rediscover your freedom. You reclaim your mind. And that's where true strength begins. Now that we've seen how emotional reactions hijack our thinking, let's take a closer look at what happens inside a mind that's never been trained. The noisy mind, a mind untrained, is a messy room. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine walking into a small room. Inside are 12 radios, each tuned to a different station. One is shouting the news. Another is playing loud music. A few are whispering worst-case scenarios. One's replaying a mistake you made last year. Another is projecting anxiety about tomorrow. All of them are on full blast. And in the middle of it all is you trying to think clearly. That's what living with an untrained mind feels like. Now here's the hard truth. Most of us never learned how to quiet the noise. We've normalized it. We wake up and immediately scroll. We multitask until we're mentally fractured. We mistake busyness for clarity and wonder why we feel scattered and restless. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, knew this well. Despite being emperor of Rome, he wrote quietly to himself, often in moments of stillness, not to impress others, not to publish a book, but to organize his own mind. His journal, what we now know as meditations, was his way of cleaning that mental room. Sorting through the chaos, asking, is this useful? Is this true? Is this mine? That's the first lesson here. Stoicism doesn't mean eliminating noise. It means not being ruled by it. You can't stop the world from being loud, but you can train your mind to remain still inside of it, like a mountain unmoved by the wind. And how do you do that? Not through wishful thinking, not through motivation quotes, but through practice. The Stoics believed in daily disciplines of the mind, tools that modern science is only now validating. Journaling helps declutter your thoughts. When you write something down, it stops bouncing around in your head. You can examine it, question it, let it go. Meditation isn't about escaping thoughts. It's about observing them without being hijacked by them. It teaches you to recognize noise and choose not to react. Breathwork anchors you to the present moment because no matter how noisy your mind is, your breath is always here, always now. These aren't soft practices. They're not fluff. They're mental weightlifting. And just like you don't wait until you're weak to start training your body, you don't wait until you're overwhelmed to train your mind. Because here's the thing, the strength of your mind determines the quality of your life. If your mind is chaotic, you'll make reactive decisions, damage relationships, and burn out fast. But if your mind is steady, even in chaos, you become the person others look to for clarity. You move through life grounded, aware, and deliberate. And let me be clear, this isn't about being perfect. It's about building inner space so you're no longer just reacting to every noise that enters. Seneca once wrote, "If you really want to escape the things that harass you, what you're needing is not to be in a different place, but to be a different person." And that starts by tending to your inner world. Not once in a while, but every single day. So here's a question worth sitting with. What's the loudest radio in your mind right now? Is it fear, guilt, pressure, overthinking? What would happen if just for today you turned the volume down and listened instead to the quiet voice underneath? The voice of reason, the one that doesn't shout, but guides, the voice that's always been there. You've just been too busy to hear it. Remember this, a noisy mind is not your fault, but leaving it that way is your choice. Over time, when you commit to the inner discipline, you don't just quiet the noise. You create a mental home, one of clarity, calm, and conscious direction. And that is the beginning of true freedom. Of course, noise doesn't just come from the outside. It also comes from inside, through emotions that cloud how we see the world. Let's talk about that. Emotion versus clarity. When feelings cloud perception. Let me ask you something. Have you ever made a decision in the heat of the moment, only to look back and wonder, what was I thinking? We've all been there. Anger, fear, embarrassment. These emotions can hit like waves. And in those moments, it feels like they are the truth. Like anger is justice. Like fear is fact. Like sadness is who you are. But here's what the Stoics knew, long before neuroscience confirmed it. When emotions take over, your perception narrows. You stop seeing the bigger picture. You start seeing only what your feeling wants you to see. When you're angry, you're convinced you've been attacked, even if it was just a misunderstood word. When you're afraid, everything feels threatening, even if most of it isn't. It's like trying to see clearly through a fogged-up windshield and still thinking you're driving straight. Seneca, the great Roman Stoic, said, "The strongest person is the one who can control himself." Not the loudest, not the toughest. The strongest is the one who sees a storm within and doesn't let it steer the ship. And here's the key. Self-control doesn't mean denying your emotions. It means recognizing them without becoming them. Let me explain. There's a powerful difference between saying, "I feel angry" versus "I am angry." The first is a moment. The second is an identity. The first gives you space. The second traps you inside a story. And when you become your emotion, you lose access to your wiser self. You react instead of respond. You say things you regret. You judge too quickly. You miss nuance. You trade long-term wisdom for short-term relief. But what if next time you feel a strong emotion rising, you paused just for a breath? What if you asked yourself, what am I actually feeling? And what is it trying to tell me? instead of who do I blame and how do I fight back? This small shift, this moment of separation between your awareness and your emotion, that's where clarity lives. That's where true inner power begins. Because emotions aren't enemies. They're messengers. They're telling you something about your values, your fears, your unmet needs. But they're not always right, and they're almost never complete. Stoicism teaches us to acknowledge feelings without letting them rule our reason. Imagine a wise leader, someone who listens calmly when others are panicking, someone who weighs facts before acting. That calm clarity isn't luck. It's trained. It's chosen. It's earned. And so is yours. You don't need to suppress how you feel, but you also don't need to act on every surge of emotion like it's gospel truth. You are allowed to feel without reacting, to be honest without being impulsive, to slow down without appearing weak. In fact, that restraint is one of the most powerful forms of intelligence there is. Let me leave you with a simple Stoic practice. When you feel emotionally flooded, try naming the emotion, out loud or on paper. I feel overwhelmed. I feel embarrassed. I feel defensive. Then remind yourself, this feeling is here, but it's not who I am. It's temporary, it's valid, but it doesn't control me. That's how you return to clarity. That's how you honor your emotions without letting them drive your decisions. Over time, the more you practice this, the more resilient and grounded you become. Not cold, not detached, but awake. And that's what Stoicism is really about. Not becoming emotionless, but becoming free. So next time emotion clouds your vision, remember this. You are not your anger. You are not your fear. You are the one who sees it and chooses what comes next. Once emotions distort our lens, the next question is, what beliefs are we carrying through that lens? And are they even ours? Rethinking beliefs, inherited or chosen? Have you ever stopped to question why you believe what you believe? Not just the big things like religion, politics, or success, but the quieter assumptions that shape your everyday decisions? Ideas like, I should always be productive. Love means sacrifice. Money equals safety. Failure is shameful. Where did those come from? Here's the hard truth most people never confront. Many of your beliefs aren't truly yours. They're hand-me-downs, passed down by your parents, your teachers, your culture, not out of malice, but out of habit. You absorbed them without question. You repeated them. And now they live in your mind like furniture in a house you never chose to decorate. But just because a belief is familiar doesn't make it true. And just because it's old doesn't mean it's wise. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't stay loyal to beliefs. They stayed loyal to truth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." In other words, popularity isn't proof, tradition isn't truth, and comfort isn't clarity. A Stoic examines their mind the way a philosopher examines a thesis. They ask questions. They challenge assumptions. They revise what no longer serves. So here's a question worth asking regularly. Does this belief still serve me? Does it bring me peace or pressure? Let's say you hold the belief, I must always be strong. Sounds noble, right? But dig deeper. What if that belief is stopping you from asking for help? What if it's isolating you? What if it's turning strength into silence? Or maybe you grew up believing rest is laziness. Now you can't sit still without guilt. You burn out. You push through. You mistake exhaustion for worth. That's not strength. That's unconscious programming. And the cost? You live a life that looks good on the outside, but feels tight and anxious on the inside because you're following rules you never agreed to. Here's where Stoic thinking becomes radical in its simplicity. You can question anything. You can step back and say, wait, who gave me this belief? Did I choose it or did I inherit it? And if the answer is, I don't know where it came from and it's not helping me grow, then you have the right to let it go. Now, don't get me wrong. Not all inherited beliefs are bad. Some are wise, some are loving, some are deeply true, but you won't know which is which unless you shine a light on them. And you won't feel free until you do. There's a kind of mental peace that only comes when your beliefs are fully yours, chosen, not copied, alive, not memorized. You stop defending outdated worldviews. You start living from a place of clarity and inner authority. It doesn't mean you'll always have the right beliefs. It means you'll have honest ones. And from there, you can keep evolving. That's what growth really is. Not collecting more knowledge, but clearing out the noise to return to what's real. So if you're feeling stuck, if life feels heavier than it should, maybe it's not your path that's wrong. Maybe it's the lens through which you're viewing it. Take time this week, journal it, reflect on it. Ask yourself, what beliefs am I living by right now? Which ones feel like pressure? Which ones feel like peace? Because peace is a compass, and truth is never afraid of being questioned. And this brings us to a truth many ignore. Thinking clearly isn't something that just happens. It's a skill, a discipline, and it must be trained. Thinking as a discipline was not a reflex. Here's a hard truth. Most people don't think, they react. They confuse a mental reflex for a conscious process. But thinking, real thinking, is not automatic. It's not instinct. It's a discipline. It requires effort. It requires stillness. And most of all, it requires courage. Because to truly think, you must be willing to slow down long enough to ask the uncomfortable questions. Not just, what do I believe? But where did this belief come from? Does it make sense? Is it useful? Is it even mine? Epictetus, the great Stoic teacher, said it plainly. If you want to improve, be willing to look foolish. And what he meant wasn't about public embarrassment. It was about vulnerability. You have to be willing to challenge your own assumptions, to admit when you're wrong, to look at your thought patterns and realize, this isn't wisdom, it's just habit. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone cuts you off in traffic. Your instant reaction? Anger, maybe even rage. But that's not thinking, that's reactivity. True thinking would pause, even for just a few seconds, and ask, why am I so triggered? Am I actually in danger? Or is this just pride getting bruised? In that tiny gap between reaction and reflection, that's where discipline begins. That's where your real mind lives. Because the mind is like a lens. If it's smudged with ego, fear, or fatigue, you won't see clearly. So the first job of thinking well is to clean the lens. And that takes work. It's easier to scroll. It's easier to repeat what you've heard. It's easier to grab the nearest thought and run with it. But easy doesn't lead to clarity. And it definitely doesn't lead to freedom. Stoic thinking teaches us something powerful. You don't have to believe every thought you think. You can filter, you can examine, you can sit with an idea and ask, is this wise? Is this mine? Is this useful for the kind of life I want to build? This is what separates emotional noise from philosophical clarity. And here's the beautiful part. Thinking as a discipline is a skill. It's not reserved for the elite or the intellectual. It's something you practice, like strength training for the soul. You train it through silence, through journaling, through listening without interrupting, through not rushing to have the perfect opinion on everything. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations to sound smart. He wrote them to make sense of his own mind, to pause, to reflect, to train himself not to be ruled by impulse. And we can do the same. The modern world is loud. It rewards speed, opinion, performance. But wisdom rewards depth. It rewards those who take a moment longer to ask, what's really going on here? What am I missing? What would a wiser version of me do right now? Thinking is a sacred act. It's how we break free from unconscious living. It's how we reclaim authorship over our lives. So the next time you're tempted to react, pause, even if it's just for 5 seconds. Even if you don't know what to say yet, even if it feels awkward or foolish. Because in that pause, you're not just being quiet. You're building a mind that can handle life calmly, clearly, powerfully. And over time, thinking this way becomes your edge. While others spiral in emotion, you stay centered. While others speak without clarity, you become known for your depth. That's the power of thinking not as a reflex, but as a discipline. And in a world that reacts, your calm thoughtfulness becomes unforgettable. But how do we even start to think clearly? It begins with this, observing reality, not interpreting it through filters. Let's explore. Observation over opinion. Seeing things as they truly are. Let me ask you something. How often do you actually see the world as it is, and not through the lens of your own opinions? It's a confronting question because most of us walk through life assuming our opinions are facts. We mistake interpretation for truth. We say things like, that was disrespectful, or they don't care, without ever pausing to ask, what am I actually seeing? And what part of this is just my filter? This is where the Stoics were radically different. They weren't interested in surface-level thinking. They were obsessed with clarity. Marcus Aurelius, emperor, philosopher, and arguably one of the most powerful men in history, once wrote, if someone can show me that what I think or do is not right, I will gladly change it, for I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed. That's not weakness. That's strength, because it takes real courage to let go of being right in order to be clear. You see, when you live through opinions, you're not thinking clearly. You're just reacting through old stories. Stories shaped by past wounds. Stories shaped by pride, by fear, by ego. And here's the catch. The more attached you are to your opinions, the more likely you are to miss what's actually happening. Let me give you a real-life example. Imagine you walk into a meeting and someone doesn't greet you. Your opinion might say, they're rude. They don't respect me. They're trying to make me feel small. But the observation, the actual fact, is simple. They didn't say hello. That's it. You don't know why. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe they didn't see you. Maybe they're having a rough morning. But when you immediately form a narrative without question, you stop seeing, you start assuming. And that's how misunderstandings grow. That's how resentment builds. That's how clear thinking dies. The Stoics had a powerful practice for this. They called it separating impressions. They trained themselves to pause when something happened and ask not, what do I feel about this? But instead, what do I see here? Is it a fact? Or is it a story? Is it a reflection of reality? Or is it a projection of your wounds? This simple shift, observation over opinion, is the foundation of mental freedom. Because when you observe without judgment, you open space for wisdom to arise. You stop being ruled by mood swings. You stop making decisions based on assumptions. You start responding, not reacting. And that's how clarity is born. In modern life, this is more important than ever. We're constantly bombarded with noise, opinions on the news, opinions on social media, opinions from friends, from family, from strangers online. But here's the truth most people miss. Noise doesn't equal knowledge, and opinion doesn't equal truth. To think clearly in a noisy world is to become still, to become observant, to be the kind of person who doesn't just echo what's loudest, but who reflects, who listens, who sees. This doesn't mean you don't have opinions, but it means your opinions are rooted in reality, not just in reaction. So next time you catch yourself spiraling in assumption, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what are the actual facts here? What am I adding to the story? What if I just observed without needing to interpret? You might find something amazing happens. Peace enters, understanding returns, and the noise it quiets. That's the Stoic way. To see clearly, to think independently, to choose presence over pride. Over time, this habit rewires your mind. You become more patient, more grounded, more honest with yourself and others. And people notice, because clarity is rare. And in a world that rewards reaction, you become unforgettable simply by slowing down and truly seeing. Let's continue. And here's a surprising truth. Doubt, yes, doubt is not weakness. It's actually the first sign of wisdom. Doubt is strength, uncertainty as wisdom. Let me ask you a quiet but powerful question. What if certainty isn't strength, but fear in disguise? In a world that worships confidence and bold declarations, we're taught that to doubt is to be weak, that if you're unsure, you're lost, that if you question what you once believed, you've somehow failed. But what if it's the opposite? The Stoics, ever the challengers of conventional thought, believe that doubt, when practiced with humility, is not a flaw. It's a gateway to deeper wisdom. Epictetus once said, "You cannot learn what you think you already know." Let that land for a moment, because the person who clings to being right has already stopped growing. They've sealed off new perspectives. They've chosen the safety of ego over the expansion of truth. And that's not intelligence. That's insecurity dressed up as certainty. True thinkers, those who live wisely, don't need to have all the answers. They don't posture or pretend. Instead, they stay open, curious, willing to admit, I'm not sure. Let me sit with this. Let me learn. That's strength, because anyone can shout an opinion. But it takes real courage to say, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's more I haven't seen. Maybe this idea, this belief, this identity I've been clinging to isn't serving me anymore. You see, doubt, when it comes from reflection, not panic, is actually a sign of growth. It's the moment your mind stretches, the moment your heart becomes bigger than your ego. Think of how many breakthroughs in history started with one uncomfortable question. What if we're wrong? What if the earth isn't flat? What if people can change? What if I'm more than what I've been told I am? Growth lives in those questions, and yet most people never ask them because they are too attached to the comfort of certainty. Let me give you a modern example. Have you ever met someone who always needs to be right? No matter what topic comes up, they shut down conversation with a smirk and a, "Trust me, I know." They never ask. They never listen. And slowly people stop challenging them, not out of respect, but exhaustion. Now compare that with someone who says, "That's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way." They're not spineless. They're wise because they're letting life teach them. They're updating their mental software in real time. That's the Stoic approach. To move through the world with strong values, yes, but also with an openness that allows life to shape you, not break you, but refine you. Doubt, in this sense, is a form of discipline. It slows you down. It protects you from arrogance. It creates space for better thinking to emerge. Because the moment you stop questioning, you stop seeing clearly. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. He wrote pages and pages asking himself if his thoughts were still useful, if his assumptions were still serving virtue. He didn't see uncertainty as weakness. He saw it as a teacher. And you can too. So the next time you find yourself clinging to a belief or a position, pause. Ask yourself, am I holding this because it's wise or because it's familiar? Is this clarity or is it fear dressed as confidence? That pause is the beginning of freedom because in that pause, you reclaim your ability to grow, to unlearn, to upgrade. Over time, this habit builds something rare, mental flexibility, and with it comes better decisions, deeper empathy, and a mind that isn't shaken by challenge. You become harder to manipulate, quicker to learn, and more at peace in a world full of noise. So yes, doubt can be strength when it leads you not into paralysis, but into honest self-examination. That's not weakness. That's wisdom in motion. And it's available to you every single day. But wisdom really begins when you realize this one life-changing truth. You are not your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. Step back from the stream. Let's slow down for a moment and ask a simple but powerful question. Who are you beneath all your thoughts? Most of us live inside our heads without even realizing it. A constant stream of inner commentary, opinions, memories, worries, and random stories flows through us all day long. And because this stream never seems to stop, we start to believe something dangerous. That we are our thoughts, but that's an illusion. The Stoics understood this well. Epictetus reminded us, it's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Think about that. It's not what happens. It's how you interpret what happens. You're not overwhelmed because life is too much. You're overwhelmed because a voice in your head keeps telling you it is. You're not angry because someone was rude. You're angry because your mind decided they shouldn't treat me that way and repeated that thought until it became reality. This is the trap. We confuse our judgments with truth. We confuse the narrator in our mind with our actual self. But here's the liberating truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer, the chooser, the one with the power to step back. Let me give you a metaphor. Imagine your thoughts are like leaves floating down a stream. Some are beautiful, others are messy. Some drift in gently, others come crashing like debris in a storm. Now, what happens if you jump into the stream and chase every single leaf? You get swept away. That's how most people live. They don't just have thoughts, they become them. I had a bad thought, so I must be a bad person. I feel anxious, so something must be wrong. I failed once, so I must be a failure. But you're not the leaf. You're not the water. You are the one sitting on the bank, watching it all go by. And when you realize this, a whole new kind of freedom opens up. You don't have to believe every thought that enters your mind. You don't have to act on every emotion. You don't have to follow every story your brain tells you. You can pause, you can observe, and then, with clarity, you can choose. Is this helpful? Is this wise? Is this true or just familiar? That simple space between stimulus and response is where power lives. It's where your real self steps in. Not the noise, not the autopilot, but the deeper, wiser you. In that space, you can say, yes, this thought is uncomfortable, but I don't have to obey it. Yes, I feel fear right now, but that doesn't mean I have to retreat. Yes, my mind is racing, but I can breathe, observe, and let it pass. This is the essence of mental discipline, not controlling every thought, but not being controlled by every thought. The Stoics didn't try to stop the stream. They practiced stepping back from it. They journaled to examine thoughts. They meditated, not in the modern sense of apps and playlists, but by sitting in silence, reflecting on the contents of their own mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." So when your thoughts turn harsh, noisy, repetitive, don't panic. Don't argue with them. Don't suppress them. Just notice them. Watch them float by. Because when you become the observer of your thoughts, not their prisoner, you become emotionally lighter, mentally stronger, spiritually freer. Over time, this practice rewires how you experience life. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of chase. You become the master of your inner world, not just a passenger in it. So today I invite you to try something radical. Don't try to fix every thought. Just step back, watch, and remember, you are not your thoughts. You are the stillness underneath them. And if you're not your thoughts, who or what is guiding them? If you don't take control, the world will. Mental sovereignty. If you don't control your mind, someone else will. Let's begin with a hard truth. If you don't take charge of your mind, someone else will. And chances are, they already have. Every day your attention is being pulled by algorithms, advertisements, opinions, news feeds, and endless noise. You wake up and within minutes, someone else's voice is shaping how you think, what you worry about, what you desire. Not because you chose it, but because you didn't defend the gate. The Stoics understood this deeply. Even in a world without smartphones or 24/7 media, they believed that mental sovereignty, the ability to govern your own mind, is one of the highest forms of power a person can develop. Because if your thoughts are not your own, then your actions aren't either. You end up living someone else's agenda, chasing someone else's definition of success, feeling someone else's fears. Let me ask you, when was the last time you sat in silence, without checking a screen, without absorbing someone else's voice? When was the last time you chose what to think about intentionally rather than reacting to what was fed to you? Most people aren't thinking. They're just echoing what they scrolled past, echoing what the loudest person in the room believes, echoing what they've been told 1,000 times. But here's what Stoic wisdom teaches us. You can't live wisely until you reclaim your mind. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, faced immense pressure from society, politics, and war. Yet he wrote every morning in his journal, not to record the world's chaos, but to anchor himself in clarity. He created a space for his own thoughts, free from influence, to remind himself of what was truly important. He didn't wait for silence to arrive. He created it, and we must do the same. That's why Stoics embrace practices that seem so simple, yet are revolutionary in today's world. Silence, solitude, reading, reflection. These aren't just hobbies. They're survival tools for your sanity. Because every minute you spend in silence is a minute no one else is programming your mind. Every time you choose a book over your phone, you're choosing deliberate thought over impulsive noise. Every moment of solitude becomes a declaration. My attention belongs to me. Mental sovereignty doesn't mean isolating yourself or ignoring the world. It means engaging with the world on your terms, not as a passive consumer, but as a conscious creator. It's the difference between being a sponge and being a sculptor. So how do you take back your mind? Start small. Spend the first 15 minutes of your day without your phone. Write down your thoughts before someone else hijacks them. Ask yourself, what do I want to focus on today? What truly matters to me? Read books that challenge your thinking, not just content that agrees with you. Create digital boundaries. And above all, practice awareness. Awareness of when your mind is drifting, reacting, absorbing blindly. The truth is, your mind is sacred ground, and not everyone deserves access to it. If you don't guard that space, it becomes a marketplace for distraction, fear, comparison, and noise. But when you choose what enters, when you take responsibility for your inner world, you become a different kind of person, more grounded, more intentional, more alive. The Stoics believed this wasn't just philosophy, it was a form of freedom, because no one can control a person who has mastered their own mind. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Who's really steering your thoughts today? You or the world? If the answer isn't you, then it's time to take back the wheel. Because if you don't control your mind, someone else will. In a world addicted to speed, you must become someone who values something else. Precision, calm, and slow thinking. Slow thinking wins. Precision over speed. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt truly unrushed, yet absolutely certain? We live in a culture obsessed with speed. Fast answers, quick replies, instant decisions. We're constantly told that if you're not moving fast, you're falling behind. But here's the twist. The Stoics didn't worship speed. They worshiped clarity. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic minds, once warned, "Hurry makes even good things dangerous." And he was right, because when you move too fast, you don't just miss the details, you miss the truth. You react without thinking. You agree without understanding. You speak before listening. And in that rush, you lose yourself. Here's the truth. Slow thinking isn't weakness. It's wisdom in motion. It's not laziness. It's the courage to pause in a world that runs. A Stoic doesn't need to rush into every argument, every opportunity, every opinion. They pause, they observe, they ask, what am I actually seeing here? Is this worth my energy? What is the wisest response, not the fastest one? Slow thinking is a discipline. It means stepping back before you step forward. It means letting your mind settle before making a decision. Because only when the dust settles can you see the road clearly. Think of Marcus Aurelius writing in his journal late at night. He wasn't just venting emotions, he was practicing depth. He was slowing down his thoughts, untangling chaos, finding clarity. That's how the Stoics moved, not fast but forward, with intention. In today's world, slow thinking is almost a rebellion. It's a choice to no longer be pulled by every notification, triggered by every headline, or swept up in the pressure to decide now. And it's a deeply liberating way to live. Let me give you an example. Imagine you receive a harsh email or text. Your heart rate spikes. Your mind races. You want to fire back immediately, but a Stoic trained mind doesn't. It breathes, it waits, it asks, am I responding from clarity or from ego? Do I want to be right or do I want to be wise? That one pause, that space between stimulus and response, that's where strength lives. Slow thinking isn't just about mental calm, it's about precision. When you move slower, you can aim better. You don't waste your energy. You don't get trapped in regrets. Instead, you create space, space to choose your words, your values, your direction. We often associate intelligence with how quickly someone can respond. But real wisdom isn't in the reaction, it's in the reflection. Stoicism teaches us that it's better to say nothing for a while than to say something we'll later wish we hadn't. It's better to take one well-considered step than to sprint in the wrong direction. And this doesn't just apply to conversations, it applies to life, career decisions, relationships, values. Instead of chasing what's urgent, a Stoic focuses on what's essential. So if the world is screaming, go faster, be the one who whispers back, go deeper. Ask yourself today, where am I rushing without clarity? Where could a pause lead to a better outcome? Over time, choosing slow thinking doesn't just make you calmer. It makes you sharper, more intentional, more at peace with your choices. Because life doesn't reward the fastest mind. It rewards the clearest one. And if thinking changes everything, then conflict, most of the time, isn't caused by people, it's caused by thinking errors. Conflict is often a thinking error, not a personality clash. Here's a truth we rarely stop to consider. Most conflict isn't personal. It feels personal, but it usually isn't. It's not the other person's personality that's the real issue. It's how we interpret what they say. It's how we react to what we think they meant. And that, right there, is a thinking error. How many times have you gotten upset only to realize later you misunderstood the tone? You filled in blanks with assumptions. You reacted to what you feared, not what was actually said. That's the nature of the untrained mind. It confuses discomfort with disrespect. It turns miscommunication into confrontation. It adds meaning that was never spoken. But the Stoics saw through that illusion long ago. Epictetus said it clearly. It's not events that disturb us, but our judgment of them. And nowhere is this more relevant than in conflict. The Stoics weren't naive. They knew that people disagree, that tensions rise, that personalities clash. But they also knew that wisdom begins not with blame, but with inquiry. Before you react, ask yourself, what else could this mean? Is this about me, or am I making it about me? Am I responding from clarity or from ego? Let me give you an example. You text a friend. They don't reply for hours. Your mind spins. Are they ignoring me? Are they upset? Did I say something wrong? But what if they were in a meeting? What if they were dealing with something you don't know about? What if their silence had nothing to do with you? See, the conflict didn't begin with the silence. It began with your interpretation of the silence. And that's the danger of reactive thinking. We create emotional battles where there's only uncertainty. Now imagine this happening in a relationship, a workplace, or between friends. Misunderstanding builds. Assumptions harden. Walls go up. But if we pause just for a moment, we can change everything. A Stoic trained mind doesn't jump to judgment. It seeks to understand before it accuses. It asks before it assumes. It listens before it speaks. Why? Because clarity always dissolves conflict faster than confrontation ever could. You don't have to agree with someone to see them clearly. You don't have to like their delivery to learn from their message. And you don't have to win every disagreement to walk away with self-respect. Thinking clearly during conflict is one of the greatest tests of emotional strength, and it begins with reclaiming your mind. Instead of, they made me feel this way, ask, why did I interpret it that way? Instead of, they disrespected me, ask, was it truly disrespect or just discomfort in disguise? This isn't about letting others off the hook. It's about not letting yourself be ruled by unchecked reaction. Because the person who can stay calm in a storm, who can hold space between emotion and response, who can ask questions rather than assign blame, that person becomes unshakable. That person becomes free. So the next time tension rises, try this. Breathe. Pause. Ask, what's really happening here? You may find that what looked like an attack was really just a misunderstanding, and what felt like disrespect was really just a difference in communication. Over time, this practice changes everything. You stop taking things so personally. You stop overreacting to imagined slights. You stop carrying grudges born from cloudy thinking. And instead, you become someone grounded, calm, clear. Because conflict doesn't begin in others. It begins in the mind. And that's exactly where you have the most power to change. And that leads us to the most important insight. It's not what you think that determines your life, it's how you think. Power is in how you think, not what you think. Let's start with a simple observation. Two people can face the same exact challenge, the same pressure, the same setback, the same uncertainty, and yet they respond in completely different ways. One person falls apart, the other rises stronger. So the real question isn't what they were thinking, it's how they were thinking. This is the part most people miss. In today's world, we put so much emphasis on content, on having the right opinions, saying the right words, projecting the right image. But the Stoics taught something far more radical and far more powerful. It's not your thoughts that shape your life, it's how you relate to your thoughts. Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But the color doesn't come from one idea. It comes from repetition, from habit, from the structure of your thinking. Here's what that means. When life hits hard, do you collapse into blame, panic, or self-pity? Or do you pause, breathe, and begin to ask better questions? That pause, that space between emotion and response, is everything. Most people never train that space. They react without thinking, absorb beliefs without questioning, and follow mental loops that lead nowhere. But Stoics do the opposite. They don't just collect clever quotes or memorize wise sayings. They build systems of thought, mental architecture that supports them in every situation, like a strong foundation that keeps the house steady in a storm. So what does that structure look like? It's not complicated, but it is intentional. First, ask. When something challenges you, don't react. Inquire. What's really happening here? What am I assuming? Is this within my control? Second, pause. Don't rush to fix, blame, or interpret. Create space between stimulus and response. That space is where clarity is born. 3. Choose. Consciously decide how you want to respond. Not from fear, not from habit, but from awareness. This is what separates mental chaos from inner strength. And this is why two people in the same crisis can walk away with totally different outcomes. Because one was trained to think clearly and the other was not. Let me ask you this. When you're overwhelmed, what's your first instinct? React or reflect? When you're criticized, do you collapse into self-doubt? Or do you pause and evaluate the truth behind the words? When you're uncertain, do you rush for quick answers? Or can you sit in the discomfort and ask deeper questions? See, power isn't found in having all the right answers. It's found in the ability to face life with mental discipline, with structure, with awareness. And this isn't about being cold or robotic. It's about freedom, the kind that only comes when your mind isn't a prisoner of fear, distraction, or impulse. A Stoic doesn't try to control every outcome. They focus on controlling their thinking process because they know that's where true strength lives. And here's the beauty of it. You don't need a perfect life to feel empowered. You just need a better relationship with your mind. Because when your mind is calm, organized, and focused, even the toughest storms feel manageable. Even the hardest moments become meaningful. And even the smallest step forward becomes progress, not punishment. So remember this, Power doesn't lie in the latest idea or trend. It lies in how you approach every moment, how you ask, how you pause, and how you choose. That's the difference between being reactive and being resilient, between being pulled by life and standing firm in who you are. And that difference is everything. Clear thinking, calm living. So what have we really been talking about here? Not just how to think better, but how to live better. Because the purpose of clear thinking isn't to impress people with clever answers. It's to liberate yourself from unnecessary suffering. It's to walk through life with fewer regrets, fewer spirals, fewer moments where you ask, why did I say that? Why did I react like that? When your mind is clean, your path becomes lighter. You stop getting tangled in what doesn't matter. You stop turning every moment into a battle inside your own head. And that, right there, is the quiet superpower most people never realize they can develop. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to train the one tool you'll carry with you in every single moment of your life, your mind. The Stoics never promised you control over the world. What they offered was something far more valuable: control over how you relate to the world. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that strength isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It shows up quietly in small decisions, subtle pauses, and the steady courage to choose clarity over chaos. Maybe you're someone who has spent a lot of life reacting. Maybe your thoughts have often run faster than your awareness. That's okay. The fact that you're here now, noticing, means you're already on the path. Because real wisdom isn't perfection. It's the willingness to pause, to observe, to adjust, over and over again. Clear thinking isn't a final destination. It's a daily practice, a quiet discipline, a form of self-respect. So let me ask you, which of these 12 Stoic lessons spoke to you the most? Which one revealed a blind spot in how you process your emotions, your beliefs, your reactions? And more importantly, what's one small shift you can make today to train your thinking toward peace instead of pressure? You see, when your thinking becomes clean, your decisions become intentional. When your decisions are intentional, your life starts to align. And when your life aligns, you don't just feel more in control, you feel more alive. That's the heart of Stoicism. It's not about being cold or detached. It's about being fully present, deeply honest, and unshakably grounded. So as you go forward, remember this: clarity is a skill, calm is a choice, and freedom, real inner freedom, is the result of how you think, not just what you think. This journey isn't flashy, it's quiet, reflective, disciplined, but deeply liberating. And it starts not with changing your entire life, but with changing one thought at a time. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this message resonated, don't just listen, live it. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more Stoic lessons to help you live a clearer, calmer, stronger life. Because the mind you train is the life you shape.